Ladies and gentlemen of the VBLS, we're back. Season 8. We've got a new generation of Pokemon. We are in Paldea, people. The best draft league around is back at it once again for the 8th season of the VBLS, coming shortly to a server near you. So the purpose of this video right here is to talk about the new format, compare it and contrast it with the old format, which was the Daddy Plan Part 2. This is a much more standard, much more normal format, so definitely a change of pace, change of perspective, so I want to make sure that you are as equipped as possible to go into this new format, understanding the differences in what to look for and what to look out for, and even what to draft coming into this new format. And I say this, I made this partially for myself, partially for you, because I'm definitely not going to call myself a savant in the slightest. I never know what's going to be good in these formats, man. I just see what works and I try my best. Alright, so Sword and Shield is officially an old generation. All that shit is in the past. Dynamax is gone. It was definitely a hotly contested edition, pretty much right from the start. I was definitely team no Dynamax for pretty much the entirety of Sword and Shield. So, no more debates. Dynamax is gone, and Terrestrialization is in. I personally think Terrestrialization is really cool. I think it's a lot more flexible and versatile than Dynamaxing is. It definitely is harder to prep for, so you win some, you lose some. But I think it has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to see how it ends up working out over this format, throughout ladder, throughout draft, and I'm just really excited to see all the new kind of crazy combinations you can achieve with this cool new mechanic. We've got about 104 new mons. Obviously, not all of them will be legal for draft. Koraidon and Miraidon are busted. In addition to that, we also have tons of busted new moves, crazy new abilities, and lots of really good items. Obviously, there's a couple that are more impactful than others, and some of the most impactful ones I think have the potential to be format warping, honestly. So we'll talk about that. And we've also got new forms, and we've got some cool ass paradox mons. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Understanding the new meta. I don't understand the new meta, so how am I going to tell you? I'm going to do my best. I don't have the answers right now. I can't just look into the future and see what's going to work. I can't look at the meta right now and know what's going to work, especially not in draft. Ladder and draft are not the same thing. And some gimmicks might work at the beginning and they might not pan out over the test of time. For example, this is the Double ZOU top 6 from yesterday. Dondozo is number 3 with 16%. That's pretty crazy. Obviously, it has a super cool combo with Tatsugiri. Not like anything we've ever seen before, so a lot of people want to try that out, myself included. But there's no telling if this is actually going to work, and I'm even more unsure about it in draft, because that's like, what, one haze away from being just a complete game-losing scenario. So, what's going on right now is not necessarily indicative of what the future will be, so I want to provide some facts, some figures, some numbers to better understand the general picture and maybe how that'll steer things in the future. So I think by looking at the roles that are available, the current stats, items, and like some of the just differences between Terrestrialization and Dynamax, I think that's a good way to get at least an initial picture of what this meta is going to be like. So starting off, Terrestrialization and Dynamax, the biggest change right off the bat from Gen 8 to Gen 9. So Dynamax was as impactful as it was controversial. It definitely wore the metagame around it for the entirety of Sword and Shield. And I mean, that's kind of the purpose of it, right? It's a generation gimmick. It's going to be big. It's going to be important. Z-moves were important. Megas were important. So why wouldn't Dynamax be? But I think Dynamax was different than those in a way that it kind of fundamentally changed how you played the game when it was active. It definitely encouraged a lot of things that we didn't typically see before. That being weakness policy focused setup, especially on mons where you're hitting him against with like a 4 times effective move. You would never like ice beam your own Dragonite to set off its weakness policy, right? But you would surf your own Colossal if it Dynamaxes. Just that extra bulk really opened up kind of Pandora's box of weakness policy stuff. I mean, if you were to go back through all the seasons of our draft league with Dynamax, I'm sure you'd see weakness policy on every mon, every mon that could feasibly run it, and even some that you wouldn't think would feasibly run it. It also helped teams to hyper-focus on one speed mode. Dynamax was so powerful where if you got a Trick Room off like the same turn you Dynamax, or maybe like you Dynamax the next turn, you can theoretically go through the entire enemy team within that Dynamax. Same thing with Tailwind, right? If you get your big threat Dynamax, you get the Tailwind off at the same turn. there's enough power in that one Dynamax where you could theoretically blow through the entire enemy team, getting that first bout of speed control, making it way more important than it would be in other ones. In other formats, I mean. It also kind of encouraged speed control through just Max Airstream itself. What's better than, like, what do you call it, Icy Wind? 130 base power Icy Wind, effectively. It also kind of encouraged some strange ways to play around Dynamax. It's not possible to make them switch out with like Roar or anything like that. So one of the best things you can do, and the additional bulk makes it so you can't just power through it a lot of the times. So one of the best ways to counteract Dynamax is just to kind of neuter it, you know? If you can cut its attack stat in half, that's a good start. If you cut it down to a third, even better. And they're stuck with something on the field that's essentially useless. They can either keep trying to get value out of their max moves or just bite the bullet, switch out a couple turns early. It also encouraged the crazy eject button trick stuff, which was insane, never seen before. At least I'd never seen it before. But that just shows how incredibly warping Dynamax was, where people were saying, all right, I'm going to sacrifice an eject button, an item slot, and a move slot, and maybe even a move slot on my partner Mon, just to make sure you don't get to use your Dynamax when you want to use it. And that entire strategy can just be totally nullified if like you lead wrong and their Dynamax isn't on the field when your eject button is, because if you take one hit, strategy's over, and they're free to Dynamax as they want. It also discouraged a lot of things that were traditionally more commonly seen. Fake Out being like the primary victim of this, which probably could afford to be a victim. Fake Out is an absolutely crazy move. Dynamax Pokemon can't be flinched, therefore faking them out is a complete waste of a turn. There's lots of possibilities with mix-ups on Dynamaxing Mons that would usually be looking to eat a Fake Out, and then, oops, Dynamax now, like, I'm going to go Fake Out a Talonflame. Nope, Dynamax Talonflame, we're hitting it with a Max Flare. Everything's off the rails already, right? So that was a huge source of variability there that is now gone without Dynamax. Also discouraged Wide Guard and spread moves in general. Wide Guard because obviously I can Wide Guard your Surf, but I can't Wide Guard a Max Geyser, right? And spread moves, I'm not entirely sure why this changed as much. I'm not completely up to date on the history of competitive VGC, but I honestly feel like compared to the Dynamax formats I played in and the non-Dynamax formats, I just don't feel good using spread moves in Dynamax formats just because of how little damage it actually does to the Dynamax target, right? If I'm in the, like, VBLN Season 1, I had Heat Wave on Volcanion almost every single week. And running Heat Wave against a Dynamax Mon is just like tickling it, right? Fishing for a 10% burn. It doesn't nearly do the amount of damage you need to do. So I'd rather just get a strong single target move to try to maybe chunk it through the Dynamax, or my personal strategy was just give up and just try to kill the teammates. And then counter sweep them with my Dynamax Mon when theirs is over. It also discouraged choice items. Well, it's funny. It encouraged and discouraged choice items, but I think it more so discouraged them. It was encouraging because it lets you turn off the choice item if you really need to. So you can run a choice band like Darmanitan and Galar, and then Dynamax, and then whoops, I don't have any choice band anymore. Hee hee. Time to hit you with a different move. But it also discouraged that because you really don't want to be locked into a choice move where it'll get the KO on the regular Mon, but it won't get the KO on the Dynamax Mon. And then the Dynamax Mon will become big, tank the hit, lower your speed, and then kill you next turn, right? So I'd rather have the flexibility to switch out if I need to. And when you just compare the amount, at least on my seasons, the amount of times I use choice items on Dynamax seasons versus non-Dynamax seasons, it's not even comparable. I used maybe Choice Scarf in Dynamax, and that's it. I almost never touched Band or Specs. It also kind of changed people's play with Encore and Taunt. More so Encore. Taunt's still valuable, but you can't Encore Dynamax Mon, which would be amazing if you locked them into Max Guard, but no. We need Dynamax to be strong, so we're not going to have that. So that's a hell of a lot of time about Dynamax. Let's talk about Terrestrialization. Terrestrialization encourages completely different things and discourages completely different things to Dynamax, so I think it's just nice to have it all in one list. And I'm sure there's things I'm missing here. Feel free to leave a comment, let me know if I'm wrong, and let me know what you think. But I think it really encourages mons that are quad weak. That's kind of the obvious big one, right? I'll draft Hydreigon and make it Terrorize into a Steel type. As obvious as that is, that's a good idea. It definitely works. It really makes it a lot less scary to run those quad mons when you know, hey, if I really need to, if I'm stuck in a bad spot, I can always make that quad weakness into a resistance, which is like an octuple reduction in damage, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. It also encourages people to abuse inherent traits. That is, if I have a good mon with like status, I would like to turn into a dark type so you can't prankster taunt me, and then I can just kind of do whatever I want. I would love to not be paralyzed. I'll turn into an electric type. I would love to be not weak to earthquake. I'll become a flying type. All sorts of stuff like that. If I'm a physical attacker, I'd love to be a fire type so I can't get burned. So that it's definitely going to make people think more about just, oh, I counter physical mon by clicking Will-O-Wisp button. Now you have to think, well, what if they turn into a fire type, right? And it makes it more, it makes you think more about historical ways we've countered certain things in the past. It also helps you with your surprise coverage boosts. So mons that were like, what do we call them? Rainbow mons, right? They become a lot more threatening when suddenly they don't just have a life orb boost, right? They have life orb, sheer force, and stab on it. And that goes from like a pretty clean 2-hit KO to a threat of an OHKO. So definitely helps out those mons. I think it also I personally think it encourages type changing moves. Being able to control mons types with like soak or what do you call it, like magic powder or something like that. I think it becomes more useful when people are paying more attention to their types and trying to change them on purpose. So if you can counteract that play by switching it yourself and possibly throw off an entire strategy, I think that makes moves like soak and magic powder decently more valuable. But the biggest thing I like about Terrestrialization is that it can viably be used offensively and defensively. Realistically, Dynamax was full on offense. You could counter Dynamax and throw out max guards, but in reality, you would probably see more success from Dynamaxing and killing the partner Pokemon in that same time frame. But you can realistically and viably defensively Terra type your mons into steel types or like poison types or something that resist their normal weaknesses, that makes it harder to prep against. Or you could also just go, and I also want to mention that that's particularly good on slow mons, but fast mons definitely have the route, at least more readily available to them, where they could just straight up Terra type into a type they already are, just get the adaptability boost and just go off with that, right? Like, how many Chiyus, or no, not Chiyu, I still don't know these fucking things' names. Qianpao, the Ice Dark one, Super Mega Weavile. I've seen that thing terrorize into a dark type so many times, it's not even funny. And that thing just gets, its sucker punches become nuclear. So, fast mons like that definitely have the privilege to pretty much adaptability Terra type themselves for extra damage. I do think Terrestrialization discourages mono attackers. If your whole team doesn't have like a rock resist, I would love to bring Rock Slide on my stockpile recover Yawn Quagsire. But if you become a steel type, well, shit, that makes my life a whole lot harder. So maybe I want to think about maybe having a water moves coverage, right? I think it also discourages choice items because, again, if I'm going to lock into a type, I'm locked into that type because I think it'll be good against your team. But if you suddenly flip the matchup on its head, well, shit, maybe I would have liked to have a life orb instead. But beyond that, I couldn't really think of much else that Terrestrialization discourages. But feel free to let me know. I'm definitely looking for other ideas. So this is just all the comparisons on one page. I'm not going to read through all these again. So on to the next thing. Let's talk about those new items. We've got a lot better additions than we got last generation. Last gen we got what? Room service and like maybe something else. I don't even remember. After an item gets introduced and like a year passes, I couldn't tell you when it came out. But some of the new stuff we have. There are 3 that I think are pretty fucking sweet. Covert Cloak is an incredible item for speed controllers. It gives you Shield Dust as your ability. Clear Amulet, it's incredible for mons that don't want to have to... It's good for mons that are immediately threatening and for mons that want to set up. Blocking any kind of stat drop, giving yourself Clear Body is crazy. It's something that, like, I've always wanted to have, like, the ability to run 2 abilities. I would rather run Clear Body plus a normal ability over running an item, but hey, now I can pretty much do that. There's also Booster Energy for the Paradox Mons, which is just kind of... It's just crazy. Why wouldn't you run this? It's a free Life Orb or Scarf, depending on what stat's highest, is assuming you don't switch out. Kind of cool stuff is the Loaded Dice. Super niche. I really just see it on Breloom and maybe something that wants to run Rock Blast. Don't bother looking at the picture behind Breloom. That's irrelevant. There are also 2 kind of shitty ones there. Mirror Herb and Ability Shield, which are just kind of stinky. New roles. So, I wanted to cover this section based on new mons that are in this game that may or may not have been in the old one, that can kind of cover some new roles on a team, and I'm starting off with speed control. So, for speed control, the general kind of things that I look at are Fake Out, which isn't really speed control, but kind of can stop your opponent from doing it. So Fake Out, Tailwind, Icy Whip, and Electro Web, while having your speed be in the top 25 percentile, which in this format is greater than base 97. Then we also have Trick Room, obviously, and Prankster, because Prankster's the best. So in terms of new Fake Out mods, I think I want to give a special shout out to Palmot and Tinkaton. Palmot is incredible, really fast, decently strong, great typing, honestly, and huge move, well, not huge, but great move pool to get the job done for whatever it wants to do. Close combat, the electric type burn up, Fake Out, even has the team res, right? That's insane. Don't want to do a team res? You can also just do a fast encore. All sorts of stuff there. Tinkaton, I think Tinkaton has a lot of potential that people are overlooking. It has a great support moveset. It doesn't have good stats, right? But it has that incredible Fairy Steel typing that we've seen work so many times before. When we're talking about Tailwind, I want to give a special shout out to Dunsparce. It has a great bulk of like 125 HP and decent defenses, while also still having the ability and the speed tier to take advantage of that post Tailwind, right? You take the hit turn 1, you set up Tailwind with the Dunsparce, and then you just start throwing out rock slides with like insane percent chances to crit, or not crit, but flinch things on the enemy team. You can pair that with a body slam with a glare, and your opponent just really doesn't get to play the game. If we're talking about Icy Web, or Icy Wind and Electro Web greater than 97 speed, Sneasel's probably the go-to here. You could run Iron Bundle, but I think that thing would be better off just killing things. Palafin is an option for there, but again, you also just want to switch out to become Super Palafin. Nothing really new here that really stands out to me. Trick Room, I think these new normal, well, I say new, but one new, one old normal type that's back. I think these guys are great. Vergarath has the third version of Dazzling, so we know how good that is being Fake Out proof. You don't even need to run the Covert Cloak. You don't even need to take the damage. You just get to set up the Trick Room. Vergarath is also really bulky. 120 HP is crazy. And Stantler is actually, I think, the bulkiest on this list. Oh, well, actually, no. Screamtail's bulkier. But it's one of the best bulky mons, and it has the only combination of Trick Room plus Intimidate. So it's got to count for something, right? And for Pranksters, Grimmsnarl's back. Why? Talking about more other new roles for team support things. These are just the general things that I look at when I'm prepping. I want to look for things with Intimidate, Redirection, Knockoff, Sleep, Quick, and Wide Guard. Calling out more standouts here. Again, I want to call out Stantler for Intimidate. It is the bulkiest Intimidate mon around, and it can also set Trick Room. I also like the Fire Tauros because it has support outside of Intimidate, right? It could do Raging Bull for a nice strong fire move that breaks screens. It can do Will-O-Wisp, and it's fast enough to pull those off reliably for your teammates as well. Redirection got a pretty big nerf, and well, nothing mechanically changed about it. Just Follow Me is a lot rarer. It's in DD, Mousehold, Pachirisu, and I think that's it. Yeah, everything else on here is Rage Powder. So Rage Powder you can obviously get around. Follow Me you cannot. So unless you're drafting Indeedee, Mousehold, Pachirisu, and maybe the baby Mousehold, that's all you got. Which makes sense. There's a lot of crazy stuff that you really don't want to let have a turn to set up and do whatever it wants. So if you need to, being able to safety goggles your way around that is definitely a... I'm glad that they cut down on Follow Me and bumped up on Rage Powder. Totally fine with that. If I'm going to call out one mon, I think Vivian has a good chance to be an influential mon. Friend Guard plus Shield Dust. Those are two great abilities. Definitely not as bulky as Clefairy is, but it has more moves. It can sleep things, unlike Clefairy can use Sing, but Sing sucks. It can use Sleep Powder pretty reliably, and if it needs to, it can just deal damage with Hurricane. Or I think it gets Pollen Puff now. I'll have to check on that. If it gets Pollen Puff, that's awesome. That's just better Butterfree. Knockoff. Not really much to say about this, but hey, Tinkaton gets that too. Knockoff and Fake Out. That's awesome. Sleep is significantly, again, didn't change and nothing really lost Sleep Powder, but they just didn't include a lot of mons that have a sleep move. So we have 4 Sleep Powders and 4 Spores. Obviously not including the baby mons. But I want to call out Jumpluff and Breloom. Jumpluff has the fast team support options. I've used it in the past. It was pretty good. Breloom is just a killer either way. If you have that thing on the field, something's going down either to sleep or to 125 base power. Well, actually, no, it would be even higher from Technician. But stupid high base power, Bullet Seed. And then we have Quick and Wide Guard. I want to give a special call out here to Flamigo. It gets Tailwind, it gets Quick Guard, and it gets Wide Guard. And it has a good attack stat, and it has Scrappy, and it has Feint. This thing has a lot of stuff going for it. And Close Combat, and Brave Bird. Oh, I love Flamigo. But obviously, with changing roles, we have a totally new meta. And with the new region, we have a new regional dex. I think it's 400 mons, plus or minus. There's some things that like aren't technically in the regional dex, like Berserker, I think. But there's also not everything in this dex is going to be in our format. We're sure should not including Koraidon and Miraidon. And not to mention, even if this was just a standard regional dex format, not all regional dexes are created equal. They all have their own unique inclusions and things that they exclude. So the bulk of the format is going to be determined by what's in this dex. And one of the things that impacts how the format's going to turn out is based on what types are there and what kind of statistical trends we see within the Pokemon that are included. So, let's talk about that. Typings. So, this is a chart that compares the prevalence of types from Season 7 of the VBLS to our tentative Season 8 list. And I think our Season 8 list has pretty much all Pokemon but Miraidon and Koraidon. I know we were discussing the legendary Ruin things, but I'm not sure if those are there. So they're in here. They might not be in the actual format. So, what do we see? Season 7%. So this top chart right here, this is the percent of the dex that is made up by Pokemon of a given type. And the red dots are Season 7, the blue dots are Season 8. You can pause and zoom in on this if you want. The biggest trends we see here are that between Season 7 of VBLS and Season 8, Water, Rock, and Psychic types just fell off a cliff. Water is still the most prevalent type, or it might be tied with Normal, but it went from like 11% of the dex to 9%, which is huge. Rock went from, what, 6 to 3%. That was the biggest drop of all. And we had rises in some other types. Normal, Dark, and Electric are way more common than they used to be. And most other typings stayed pretty much the same, going up or going down a little bit. But you can see this chart on the bottom of the biggest winners and losers. Obviously, Normal shot up the most, Rock fell the most. So, again, these trends are going to influence the season and influence what's available to draft. And with the draft pool changing, the best possible offensive and defensive typings are going to change. So, this is just a little tool I built last season for Season 7 to calculate the most powerful offensive type. The way this works is I take the Pokedex with the frequency of Mons, and then essentially for each possible attacking type, it's how many Mons are hit super effectively by this, minus how many Mons resist this. So you can see, like, Normal is always going to have a negative number here because nothing is weak to it, and it only has resists. And Rock is always going to have a pretty big number because it has the best type matchups overall. And we have the current ranking here on Season 8. Rock is the best, Grass is the worst. And then we have it compared to the Season 7 number. And then the change over there on the farthest right column. So, things that got worse. Ghost got a hell of a lot worse, which makes sense, right? You greatly ramp up the number of normal types you got. Ghost is going to stop hitting things super effectively and start doing no damage at all. Fairy gets a lot better. I don't really exactly... Why is that? Oh, Fairy gets better because a lot of dark types show up. Dragon types showed up more, and then there's less poison types. And what else is there? There's also... Yeah, so I think it's really just the rise in dark fighting, that kind of stuff. So the big winners are actually poison as well. There's a ton of grass types here. This also can help give you a good idea of what general types are going to be important to prioritize offensively, and what types might be common as Terra types in the format overall. Up next, we have defensive typings. So these charts here are kind of the same thing. This chart here on the right is dual types. The chart here on the bottom is single types. So the way this works is it takes every given type combination in the format, and it's going to weight this number right here is the average multiplier of an incoming attack weighted by the frequency of that stab attack on the format. That's a lot of words. What it essentially means is if an attack is coming into this Pokemon, average across every Pokemon in the formats using its stab attacks, what is that multiplier going to be? So, if we're going by single type, Steel is going to have the lowest multiplier because it takes the least damage on average from an attack coming in from a given Pokemon in this format. When we add dual typings, Steel and Fairy, have the best synergy, because they just are the fucking best type combo ever, and they always will be, unless they nerf one of them. And down here on individual types, we see types that are commonly known to be shit are doing really poorly. Ice and rock are very bad. And so for these charts, the smaller number is going to be better, and you can see some things got worse, some things got better between seasons. If a type got better, its change is negative. If a type got worse, its change is positive. So fun stuff to look at. It's funny how this season normal is exactly 1.0. That's because there are exactly as many ghost types as there are fighting types. But typing is not everything. Stats are where it's at. So let's take a look at these stats of the new season. So these analyses are done, well, the next couple of slides are done using fully evolved Pokemon in the format, using their effective bulk instead of their HP, defense, and Spadef. The reason I do this is because I think it's a better methodology. HP and defense are kind of nebulous, right? Like, you might have a general idea of what those stats do if you've been playing for a while. Like, you know, oh, 100 HP is pretty good. I hit a good number for a substitute, so it doesn't die to a seismic toss. 80 defense, that's pretty normal, pretty middle of the pack. But when you have different combinations of, like, how good is 70 HP and 90 defense? How good is 100 defense and 40 defense and 40 HP? That gets really confusing. So if there was a way to normalize it and truly just see, okay, this mon is bulkier than this mon, I would like to use that instead of the arcane combination of HP and defense and special defense. So in the analyses in the next couple of slides, we're going to be going off of attack, effective defense, which is EDEF, special attack, effective special defense, which is ESPDF, and speed. So how do I calculate these effective defenses? So these values calculate, or these take into account the HP and defense of a given Pokemon. This could be on the physical or the special side. The number that comes out for the effective defense is essentially if the mon in question were to have 80 base HP, which is the average base HP for fully evolved mons, to be as bulky as it is now, its new defense base stat would have to be whatever the effective defense is. So, for example, Avalugg has 95 HP and base 184 defense. But if Avalugg were to have 80 HP instead of 95, to take the same percent damage from attacks, its base defense would need to be bumped up to 207 base defense. Therefore, Avalugg has an effective base defense of 207. So you can kind of see that in this graphic here. If Hisuian Avalugg had these same stats, it would be exactly as physically bulky as regular Avalugg. So in this case, if we were to compare them, we would say Avalugg has an effective defense stat of 207. So, let's start with attack. Average attack stat in this format is 92, which is Hawlucha. In the past, Hawlucha's been made fun of by myself for being pretty weak when it needs to be strong. But, you know, if Hawlucha's middle of the pack, maybe that's not so bad. If you're able to draft a mon with over 130 attack, that is in the top 10% of all mons in this format, so you're doing pretty good if you can get a mon with over 130. For effective defense, the average effective defense is 82. There are a lot of outliers on this chart over here. You can see there's like 7 dots up here. So these mons are like above and beyond what you would ever expect for an effective defense. That being Avalugg, like we already talked about, that's the highest. Dondozo, Great Tusk, Iron Hands, Slacking, and Stonejourner are all off the charts total outliers for their effective defense. And if we were to look at them on with an average effective defense, it'd be your boy Clawitzer. Special attack. The average special attack stat is going to be 80. Colossal, looking pretty nice. If you can nab 120, that's in the top 10%. If we're looking at equivalent special defense, it's also 82. There's only a couple outliers on this one, but you can tell. Take a wild guess as to what fully evolved Pokemon has an effective defense stat, or effective special defense of 371. Yeah, it's Blissey. Duh. The other 2 outliers are Goodra and Florges, and again, Clawitzer is middle of the pack. If we're looking at speed, the average speed is base 80, so something like a Dragonite, which has historically been looked at as kind of below a good speed, but hey, in reality, it's right dead smack in the middle average. And if you got a mon with more than 111 base speed, you're outspeeding more than 90% of all mons. So, going into this new meta with average stats, if you were to distill a mon from all the fully evolved mons of this format, it'd have 92 attack, 82 effective defense, 80 special attack, 81 effective special defense, and 80 speed. So, we can see, based on these numbers, Now, this format is definitely biased towards physical attackers rather than special attack, but bulk is relatively evenly distributed. Make sure to pick up your Intimidate, folks. So, based on all this stuff, it's kind of a general broad overview of the format. I want to talk about one Pokemon in particular that I think would be a really, really good addition to any draft, and you'd be lucky to pick it up if it were anything cheaper than like 4 points. And that mon is Flamigo. I love this mon. Flamingos have always been my favorite bird. They're super cool, and they have a Flamingo Pokemon. Look at that. Whoa! And it just so happens that he's stacked. So, Flamigo, he's probably going to be pretty cheap. 5 points or less. But I really don't think it should be. I think this thing could be an easy 5-pointer. Shouldn't be lower than 4. Especially when you look at all the good stuff it has, right? It has an amazing ability in Scrappy. It has a cool little niche ability with, I think it's called Co-Star, if you have like a Shell Smasher next to it. It has above average attack and speed. I don't know what its effective defenses are, but they're definitely below average. And like we showed on the prior slide, fighting and flying are both really good stab types to have in this format. It's really hard to resist both of those. And it has the perfect move pool for what it wants to do. Close combat, like a lead set right here. Easy peasy. Lead it off game 1. Give it the covert cloak so it can't be faked out. Close combat, Brave Bird, feint or taunt, and Tailwind. Gets you in a great spot for the jump, and you'll be able to start taking lives next turn with Close Combat and Brave Bird. This mon also is a great Terra candidate to Terra into a Ground type or a Steel type. Either of those are good. Ground type is more offensive, can help you hit the mons that you can't cover with just your flying and fighting stab. If you have Terra Blast on this thing, you pretty much have perfect coverage with flying, fighting, and ground. Or if you want to be defensive and try to bulk this thing out, go Terra Steel. Why not? Go wild. I'm so excited for this format. Terrestrialization opens up so many doors for different viable Pokemon. So many of these new Pokemon are cool, have ways to stand out and not just kind of fall to the wayside. Like, this thing was on route, like, whatever the equivalent of Route 1 or 2 is in the game. And it's totally viable for a competitive draft league. So, let me know what you guys are looking forward to drafting. There's lots of other ones I wanted to talk about, but I wanted to showcase Flamigo a little bit. I'll do the Tinkaton video, talk about how it's the next top 3 fairy type. I'll do that when I do my draft review. But yeah, let me know what you guys are looking forward to drafting. Let me know what you think about the format. And that's all I got for this one. Hopefully the draft starts up soon, and we'll have a draft review in just maybe like a week or 2. Who knows? See you next time, everybody. Happy planning, happy drafting.